Hello, I'm James Rink, founder of the Super Soldier Talk podcast, and now the Super Soldier Activation Conference taking place this October 8th to the 12th in Orlando, Florida. This video features Super Soldier Tomas Alvin, recorded a year ago in Tampa during our Timeline of Disclosure event. Your support through ticket purchases and donations has enabled us to create powerful stories like this. We need your help now to continue sharing these narratives. Will you consider supporting the nonprofit Healing Soul Survivors by joining us in Orlando or by donating now? Your contribution helps us keep these urgent stories alive. Get your tickets now at supersoldiercon.com, and thank you for being part of this journey. Par ardua ad astra.
My name is Tomas Alvin, and at least one of my alters served as a military intelligence officer in the American chapter of Dark Fleet, which is Joint Defense Force Command, also known as the JDFC. It is basically the U.S. Space Navy, as opposed to like Solar Warden, which is the Coast Guard. And Solar Warden vehicles and methods are used specifically for like planetary defense and, like I said, defending within the solar system, as opposed to like the Space Navy, which goes out into interstellar space. It's more about, I guess, defending our larger galactic territory. I think like I heard somebody say like 150. I'm saying like I think the U.S. controls like 45 star systems. My female alter, Tanya, she was military intelligence. I don't know if she did the complete 20 years, but she did a lot of deep cover assignments. Basically infiltrating different ET groups. I'm excited that my memories are obviously aren't 100% with these, so. Tanya was terminated before like finishing the entire 20. I have a total of 30. I've identified 12. 6 of them are still living, and I've been in contact with them. I remember being returned at the age of 3. So I figured it's, being taken and returned at that point, and having your brain capacity suddenly reduced to that of a 3-year-old will effectively wipe your memories. And, it's one of those things where it's not just 20 and back, it's 20 and back and back and back. It's effectively a causality loop. And I think this time around I broke the loop by intentionally flunking the Zener test when I was in kindergarten. I'm pretty sure there's other things, but like this time around I didn't get sent through, I didn't get picked up in a white van, and that's probably has a lot to do with it. I was actually part of the Presidio, which is the same organization that runs Montauk. It's just the Central West Coast version as opposed to New England, where Montauk is located. There's like a similar project in about every region in the United States. Because it's regional, and that's where I ended up spending actually when I was in high school, up until I was 21, I lived in San Diego, and I definitely believe that Coronado I might have been involved at something going on in Coronado Island too. I don't remember the details. I do know, I realized in hindsight in San Francisco, where the Presidio is located, that once a week, it appears that a lot of other members of the crew of the USSS Franklin would show up at this one church in the Castro once a week. And like I said, I realized that in hindsight, that there, a lot of, I think the rest of the officer class might have, some sort of subconscious regrouping thing going on. One of the things, hindsight being 2020, My alter Tomcat is the one who flies the El Chappo. It's kind of like, it's kind of small, medium small cargo hauler. It's got a no questions asked policy. He's kind of like a cross between Han Solo and Jack Sparrow. Basically, the one person that the authorities could never catch, so to speak. My alter Junai was with the Yozora no Kaishu, and he did mostly logistics work until somebody had the balls to attack us, but ended up firing one of the defense turrets for a while. So that's one of the more distinct memories I remember from him. Most of my alters, 3 of them were military. Several others were like government contractors, and the rest seemed to be like civilians. 2 of my female alters were domesticated housewives. Go figure that. Yeah, the Yozora no Kaishu is the Japanese Dark Fleet, and they actually, as far as the uninfected Draco go, like they actually diplomatically get along the best because they do build mechs that make some equal combatants to an Alpha Draco, and the Draco honor code and the Samurai honor code complement each other. So that's one of the reasons why the Japanese are the ones who deal with the Draco the best. The Yozora no Kyushu is mostly the higher ranking, the officer class are usually full-blooded Japanese, but they do have like the others doing like less desirable work. Let's put it that way. I believe because they're part of the same Axis powers during World War II, like the Y&K probably left around the same time the Germans did, and their colonization probably goes back just as far. Maybe the 100th Monkey Leap through anime and manga, like it definitely bleeds through them from that. Okay. It's definitely like it's their soft disclosure. Well, who's responsible for giving us floating speakers? That's rudimentary anti-gravity technology. It's one way they're leaking it in. Another way, you got hydrogen fuel cell powered flashlights. Bit overkill. And there were people probably in the billions, at least. You combine time travel and space colonization. As far as their exact numbers, though, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they probably had access, at least in the beginning, with the same technology that the Germans did. Of course, they probably took it and went their own direction. Like I said, they're the ones who go around building mechs. I don't see too many other factions doing that. I'm sure they have flushable toilets. Well, the JDFC would use Japanese toilets, which are entirely different monster than what we're used to. I know they use like basement universes as a way to maximize storage for their cargo hold. Basically, when you have object where the inside is bigger than the outside, they utilize those, and like I said, for their cargo hold. It would be at least twice, if not 4 times, the size, like bigger than on the inside than it is on the outside. But then again, I don't know that much about basement universes, but I don't know if there is an actual limit on the size on the inside. The El Chappo was a different alter. like I said, he'd haul stuff around with no questions asked policy. So, some of it might have been contraband on a few planets here and there. The Merchant Marines. Yeah, I don't really have that much of a deep connection to it. One of my Maltar Tommy, one of his co-workers was like a 5th generation spacer, and she had some like genetic damage as a result of that. And like, I know they can be problematic because there's no real authority overseeing them. One thing, my sleep cycle's all messed up because of genetic engineering. I've never had, I'd call it even a resemblance of a normal life, like trying to do 9 to 5 routine, because there's always some sort of like catch-22 or outside force interfering with it. It's like, every shitty entry level job I've had, it seems like it's the same, characters being played by different actors. It's like, it's like the same, butch lesbian supervisor, the same Bible thumping assistant supervisor. It's like the same, for lack of a better word, wigger who's always going around threatening to kick my ass. There's always the chubby blonde who decided she hates me upon first laying eyes on me. And then there's my only friend. And he's like the same guy every time. Literally, like, same dude. Always shows up. Yeah, it's like such a hostile work environment. I couldn't last. Well, I can tell you about some of the abilities that manifested here, which is safe bet were probably a lot more intense out there. It was like I've experienced precognition, telekinesis, and I mean by telekinesis is displays of invulnerability, superhuman speed, and superhuman strength that had absolutely nothing to do with my muscles. Like being able to push a car back when the driver absent-mindedly hits the accelerator when I happen to walk right in front of it. And all of a sudden, without even looking, my hand was on the hood pushing the car back. And that happened twice. So, yeah, like, it definitely makes sense that abilities like that came from there. One of my female alters suffered a near-death experience when it was Tanya, when she was on an undercover assignment that went south, and that caused a form of quantum entanglement between us. The initial one lasted about 5 years, where basically, it was a partial rehoming. So her personality bled through, so did her etheric mold during that time. So yeah, it definitely had, a highly disruptive effect on my life because of that. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. Because I haven't had my caffeine yet, James. I haven't had my coffee yet. Yeah, I'll do a follow-up later. Of course, my mom calls. Murphy's Law timing. I'm in the middle of an interview. What's up?
Hey, sweetie.
Hi, Janine.
Hi. How's everything?
Everything's going well.
Hi, my darling. Look at you. You look terrific.
Thank you. I haven't had my coffee yet.
Oh. Well, I have to call you early because I don't want to interrupt what's happening later. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you? Everything's covered basically now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So
Yeah.
I understand that James would like you to stay an extra couple days to do videos.
Yes, what we're trying to do now that you called.
We're actually recording right now.
Yeah, we're actually recording right now. Yeah, you and your Murphy's Law timing. I'll talk to you later, okay?
Oh, well, look, and you can just let me know when you want to leave because I got to get your train ticket in.
Yes, I know. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye. I love you. All right, my name is Tomas Alvin, and I'm a veteran of the Secret Space Program. Starting to my earliest cognitive memory, I remember being strapped down to a medical exam chair in a white room, and there were 3 Asian men wearing surgical scrubs, and one of them approached me while the other 2 stayed behind, and he shined what looked like a red laser into my right eye, and the next thing I knew, I experienced a quantum leap style zap, and at 3 years old, outside with my mother calling for me, literally in mid-stride. I remember shortly after that, I was 4 years old living in Guadalajara, Mexico, and we're at a covered market, and somehow I got separated from my mother, but I felt this large dude's hands kind of how you can immobilize a small kid when you push their biceps together against their chest? Well, basically somebody grabbed me like that, and I saw a woman's hand with this device that kind of like a black tapered tube and had a pointed glowing green tip. And I remember this one, I received the scar on my forehead, and it was a searing, excruciating pain, which you think a 4-year-old would be screaming bloody murder, and I just stood there going, ow, 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 ow. And the next thing I knew, I was standing behind a woman who was loosely dangling a cigarette in her hand, and of course it was right level at my forehead at that age. And then she noticed me, oh, pobrecito niño, pardon. And the thing is, what I noticed is the glowing cherry on her cigarette was green instead of red. I'm not even going to hazard a guess on that. 5 years old, I was in kindergarten, and this woman walks in, whispers into my teacher's ear. My teacher points at me and tells me to go with her. And she borrowed the school psychologist's office, and she proceeded to start testing me on my 1, 2, 3s, ABCs. She did had cards with images of different professions. Asked me to guess what they were, like a fireman or police officer, etc. Then she did the Rorschach test, the block test. And then she proceeded to do the Zener ESP test with the cards. And at first I started acing them because I can see the energetic shape right through the card. But I just had a really sinking feeling that I needed to flunk this test. So she'd hold up a card. Energetically, I'd see the rectangle. I'm like, triangle! And she'd flip it around as rectangle. Sorry. And I can energetically see the wavy lines. I'm like, it's a circle. Flip it over. Sorry. And show me the wavy lines, etc. And I'm guessing it's because it's a 20 back program. It's 20 and back and back and back. It creates a causality loop. But once you've experienced enough repeating the same moment in time, after a while you experience deja vu. Because I've seen this before, And I think that was the reason why I knew I had to flunk that test. Because I broke the causality loop, I don't think I was abducted this time. I probably have multiple times before, but I've had all kinds of flashbacks throughout my life from different alters. And I have half my alters are females. So, talk about added confusion. So, like, I like some of them in particular, I've had reoccurring flashbacks throughout their life, from early childhood until throughout adulthood. Like, I had a flashback from my alter autumn, and in her situation, the genetic sample they used to make her was kept on ice too long, so it ended up having a damaged Hox gene, and neither of her arms developed, like, past her shoulders, like maybe a few inches past her shoulders. So they just cut their losses and adopted her out. I had a flashback of her. So here's the thing, like, he's like, this is not a dream. So I tell people, it's reliving a memory. Even decades later, I can remember every detail. If it's a dream, it's your subconscious trying to tell you something. The moment you wake up, it's slipping back into your subconscious. That's why people are told to keep dream journals, because after a while, they just don't remember it. But if you're reliving a memory, again, like even decades later, I remember every detail of it. So it's one of the biggest mistakes SSP vets make, is describe it as a dream. And that's where the debunkers love to get us. So anyways, like, I had this flashback of her when she maybe around 7 or something. And this neighborhood kid, he looked maybe about 13 or 14. In this colony, there's kind of, I don't know what you call it when part of a stream goes in, or a river goes inland a bit. This was kind of like drying out. There's maybe 6 inches of water, mostly kind of grassy area. Well, this neighborhood kid took a wooden raft, slapped an anti-gravity engine on the bottom, and started navigating this thing with a bamboo rod. And of course, the local neighborhood kids saw that, and they all ran over and climbed up. And I remember from this flashback, instead of climbing up on anything like the other kids did, took a running jump and landed on the end. And the other kids seemed to be really impressed by that. Also, I remember she was wearing like a one-piece mallet, like typical girl's bathing suit for that age. And pretty much, like, because there's only one anti-gravity engine on it, that thing's all wobbly and shit, so all the kids are trying to balance it and things all, until they got to the end of this little grassy waterway, and then all the kids jumped off and let it crash into the bamboo patch. The one indicator that I was somewhere other than Earth was the bamboo on this planet is red, as opposed to kind of yellowish green color that we have. And yeah, I've had multiple flashbacks from her. And there seems to be some sort of, like, she seems to be always like a couple years behind me in age. And I had a very disturbing flashback of her when she's maybe 11 or 12, and she's being molested by this middle-aged man. And I specifically remember her intentionally looking away from this guy. And I guess I should probably spare the details on what that guy was doing, but it was pretty horrible. And I felt every sensation, every physical sensation. I felt all of her emotions, everything. And God, she was 11 or 12, so I was probably maybe 14 or something when I experienced that. And then when I was 16, I had a flashback of her getting laid. And like I said, again, I could feel every physical sensation. And I tried to tell a friend of mine about that, and he just looked at me like, dude, that's disturbing. And that was my best friend at the time. So, So, yeah, I kept having these flashbacks from, one of them I call him the floater because he has the ability to levitate. Starting from, I remember like 3 or 4 years old, hover an inch off the ground. And I remember asking my mom, I was like, is there a way to walk without moving your legs? And she's like, well, roller skating. I was like, no, that's not what I meant. Because I couldn't tell sometimes, especially when I was really young with these flashbacks, is this, if it was my actual life or is this the flashback? But then later on, he started using that ability to scale walls, climb across a ceiling, and eventually he started to take like a running jump and would be airborne for like a couple hundred feet. And I remember eventually when he's able to achieve sustained flight. And apparently people on this colony, like, they know you could do that. Apparently they don't seem to overreact. And it looked like some sort of industrial Canadian city. So what's that colony look like? A lot of brick buildings, lots of catwalks. And yeah, it was like suburban neighborhoods. A lot of these breakaway colonies look like pretty similar to Earth. And I'm wondering, it's probably by design. It's like, well, New Atlanta definitely, like, I remember that had a lot of, like, kind of cylindrical shaped building with, like, pastel stucco. So, yeah, they had some highly advanced technology there. I remember the public transportation system. They used like a magnetic corridor, and it basically looked like it was made. The inside looked like it was made of blue plastic with a light blue grid pattern, glowing grid pattern over it. No, normally there's a vehicle that goes through that, but I remember being with a group of teenagers after stealing a pair of VR goggles from a store, basically running on these tracks without the vehicle. Because the way they work is like if you were to drop something out, it'll float, right? Like if you give it some motion, it'll keep moving until something stops it. So me and these kids, we ran onto this track and basically in the surfer position, and I remember coming off onto a station with a rather surprised look on some of the passengers or some of the people who were waiting for the train. From what I saw, it's like it looks similar, but it's more advanced. Later on, I saw my alter Tomcat when he basically took Autumn away from Corellia. He was flying. It looked almost like the shape of an ambulance, except as a flying vehicle. And what happens when two opposite sex clones meet? Because the genetic attraction is 100%. They typically fall head over heels for each other. So yeah, I have 2 of my alters right now are a couple. But yeah, because like Autumn adjusted, she does everything with her feet that we do with our hands. And yeah, I remember that they're piloting a vehicle, and she insisted on flying. And she's the oldest trick in the world. She's like, "Hey, look, what's that?" And he looked over, and she slid the button with her feet, grabbed the steering column, and just started steering the thing. And so I telepathically told him, like, dude, never underrate Autumn's ability to adapt to her condition. I don't know how they produce they probably use something like either 0 point or cold fusion or something like that. But one thing is, the utilities never go out. there's no such thing as a power outage. I think like utilities are considered a right, and people don't have to pay for them. They kind of come with the place. And like, okay, so like I made it like Autumn, her life mirrored mine the most. She's like, I'm a struggling artist. She's a struggling artist. So I made an arrangement with her. If something happened to me and I reached the end of my mortal coil prematurely, I can rehome to her. And the reason why is because, like I said, her life paralleled mine the most, so it'd be the least disruptive. Aside from a strange cooking utensil I saw one of my lady alters use, I'm trying to think. Jeez. I do know that they could predict earthquakes down to the minute. And this is definitely a flashback from one of my female alters, because I remember walking in high heels and remember how uncomfortable they were. And they were like basically knocking on people's door, basically, hey, a couple minutes, there's going to be like a 5.8 on the Richter scale. And I remember this one dude, kind of shoulder-length hair, wearing a white wife beater, had a hat on. And I remember he kept staring at my chest. I was like, hey, eyes are up here. So, yeah, that's really like the only real indication I knew I was in a female body. So most of my alters, I noticed, like, some of them are like government employees. Like 3 of them are military. Several of them are like government employees, and it seems like the rest are civilians. I believe I'll have a total of 30 alters. And I've identified 12 of them. 6 of them are still alive of that 12. And I've been in communication with them. So, yeah, there's Autumn. Tomcat's a workaholic. He's kind of hard to get a hold of. If he's not doing maintenance work on the Hyperion Station, he's trying to get laid. So, so that's him. Tomcat is the one who I literally physically traded places with when we were 11 years old. The time my mom took us up to the Harvest Moon Festival up in the Rocky Mountains, and it was a 4-hour drive, which meant it was an overnight. So they already had these large wooden cabins set aside or separated by gender. And I remember, it's time to go to bed, and this guy's like, hey kid, do you want the top bunk? I'm like, sure. Climbed up there. And I didn't fall asleep. I just closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, I was in like this tube, a sleeping tube that was like maybe, it was like maybe 45-degree angle, but the gravity was aligned, so it felt like I was lying flat on my back. And the first thing I was like, what the hell is this? Pop! And I opened it, and I hopped down, and I could feel like the metal grating on the floor was like it was like a lot heavier around my feet than versus like head or raise my hand is even lighter. And that's because of the artificial gravity. And there were like double rows of these tubes and then some sort of like monitoring device. And then there were like these valves that were releasing steam. I guess like taking out the excess moisture from inside the sleeping tubes. And I can hear like the engine ambience from these things. And I looked around and I saw like from the corridor, like 2 guys walking down with flashlights. I'm like, oh shit, let me get back in my tube and shut it. And I closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, I was back in that cabin in the woods. And apparently when I made contact with my alter Tomcat, he's like, yeah, he was on a civilian transport. And all of a sudden, next thing you knew, for 30 seconds, he was in a cabin in the woods. So we literally physically traded places for like 30 seconds. I'd call that maybe bilocation. But a lot of times when I'd have these flashbacks in the moment, because you're literally borrowing a moment, it's almost like you're sharing a moment with each other's life. Like, I tend to have a knowledge of, like, generally what's going on around me. Like, for instance, like, if you got a smartphone, you know what it is, you know what it does, you got a general idea of how it works. It's kind of like that. So I ended up retaining a lot of technical knowledge. It used to scare the shit out of some of my friends when I'd come up with like schematics for like cybernetic implants and plasma cannons and shit like that. So, yeah, after pretty much it, like, one of the things is my alter Tanya, who was she was Darkfleet military intelligence. And she was on an undercover assignment that went south. She got captured by the bad guys, and she got interrogated. And by interrogated, she was raped and tortured by Black Draco. And she suffered a near-death experience because of that. And that's the reason why I had to end up with the quantum entanglement between us, me and her. And it lasted, the initial one lasted roughly 5 years, where she basically completely taken over my life. And all of a sudden, just started fading away right around 2001. So that's when I called out. It's like, this is massively confusing. I need somebody to help straighten this shit out, right? I went to my local Friday night hangout. And around the time, like late 90s, maybe early 2000s, there was this kind of cheesy, low-budget TV shows, an X-Men knockoff called Mutant X. And the character who's their wise, benevolent leader was a guy named Adam. When I got to my Friday night hangout spot, I went to the part in the back where the smoking area is, and this guy introduced himself as Adam. He was physically identical. Same voice, same personality, same mannerism, same wardrobe, same personality, same deep and profound wisdom. And I had a 2.5 hour long face-to-face conversation with a fictional character. The only logical conclusion I come up with was that was an angelic encounter. It's the only thing only thing that makes sense. So after helping me straighten that out, and a couple visits from pagan gods in my dreams, but yeah, I've experienced all that, and I used to wonder, like, what am I, a time traveler or starseed? What the hell's going on? And it was around 2015 is when I saw Corey Good on Guy MTV. It's like, that explains it. That totally explains everything. It's the only thing that explains everything. I call it the unified theory. And so I met this dentist who uses hypnosis on his patients instead of anesthesia. And I told him about the SSP, and that piqued his curiosity, so he agreed to give me the hypnotic regression for free. And he basically put me under and said, "You will remember." And it's been his constant drip, 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 drip ever since. So I did go to a hypnotist, and I've also, like, part of it is, I think, is because of the quantum entanglement with my alter, like, made it easy to access those memories. Because normally that doesn't happen. Normally when the alter gets killed, the rehoming process is seamless, and you don't get basically stuck with each other like I did. My alter, Tommy, is the one who's the head of maintenance at the Hyperion Station. And, like, yeah, there's all kinds of crazy hijinks that happens on that station. I know, who was it? Ilyana Polnik was, I believe she was a scientist working at that. And I remember, like, you know, coming and doing maintenance work and have you buried in the microscope. It's like, yeah, over there, fix that. That's probably why she doesn't remember me. I remember her. But there was an incident with this woman who created these 7 experimental clones. And these clones, you know, have a hive mind. You know, all their thoughts work in sync together, all 7 of their minds. The problem is when you're tinkering with genetics, there's always unforeseen consequences. And these clones didn't have any vocal cords. And so somebody considered it a failed experiment and scheduled to have them terminated or destroyed, and she couldn't do that because these were her babies. And so she took all 7 of them, stole a shuttle, and claimed asylum at the Hyperion Station. And that created a huge mess because the ICC company that was responsible for them wanted their property back. And so that created a huge controversy. Basically, the idea, if they're going to stick around the station, they got to earn their keep. Well, it turned out they're really good at killing rats. Get them up in the maintenance shafts, and you know, because they all 7 of their minds are coordinated. You know, one of them see a rat just for another one to come up behind it and go. They even like, there's one tube in one of the corridors that they opened up one of the shafts in the ceiling and they started tossing out like dead rat bodies or carcasses. So a little pile was building up after a while. And there's a few instances where, you know, they chased a couple rats and they ended up accidentally breaking into a room where there's a couple who were trying to make love. And let's just say the result was a couple of blood-curdling screams. So yeah, there's a few instances with that. But for the most part, you know, they came really good at like I said, killing rats. And you know, that was kind of a problem on that station. Because before the Americans got it, it used to be property of the Soviets. And that's probably how you got the rats in the first place. So, and then there was an incident with some priestesses. Apparently, they all had a prophecy that, like a 10,000-year-old prophecy, that they would end up on that space station. The prophecy, well, let me reverse that. What it was is make some extra money, decided to do a bit of asteroid mining, except the oscillators should have been replaced on the sensors, and it didn't. But the guy, I guess, who owned the station was too cheap to do that. And there were some compounds within one of the asteroids that didn't get scanned correctly, and it ended up blowing it up, and it caused a larger rock to head right towards a planet, which was like right on top of the priestess's temple, right? Like, oh shit, you know, normally we shouldn't mess around with a primitive planet, but we're kind of responsible for this. So let's get ahead of this asteroid. And they ended up evacuating this temple with all these like Venusian priestesses. And right before this asteroid, or I guess by then the meteor, basically turned it into a crater. So they brought them aboard a space station, and they said, yes, our prophecy said we'll end up in the Forever Night City. And even up to the point where like the head security guy, because they're taking them through like a secure area. There's a drone, and it's like the Guardian will ask the knight a riddle. Behold, and it's like security access code. Mary had a little lamb crossing the Mississippi Delta. Security code granted. See, he solved the riddle and let us pass. It's like stuff like that. So, I don't know about the specifics of the Hyperion Station. I know it was built by the Tall Whites, and somehow the Soviets got a hold of it. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Americans bought it. And the guy who owns it, we know him on Earth as Ted Turner. Guy owns the space station. Although we know him as Aldous Stark. Yeah, like Stark or like Tony Stark. Yeah. I wonder if the character of Tony Stark might have been based off of this guy. It's possible. The Yuzuru no Kyushu is the Japanese Dark Fleet. It's my alter Junai Kirin who served in that. And he did mostly logistics work, maintenance and stuff like that. And they use basement universes as a way to maximize storage in the cargo hold, which is basically you walk into a room and the inside is bigger than the outside. So, there's like a bunch of those. And I remember one time somebody accidentally locked us inside, and it was the guy, I think his name is Ryu, I'm not sure, but, it's like, don't worry, as soon as somebody realizes we missed our duty shift, they're going to come looking for us. And it's like, what if we get hungry? It's like, there's plenty of food in here. It's not prepared. It's like it beats starving. And after a few minutes, like, Ryu, if you don't shut the fuck up right now, I'm going to kick your ass. Okay. But eventually somebody did come over and open the door. So, I do remember very succinctly, like, because we served on a command carrier. It was like a 20-mile long, looked like a giant flash drive with a city on top. And like a large cylindrical shaped thing on the bottom, which was its primary weapon. And I do remember somebody had the balls to attack us. And I don't remember seeing explosions, but I heard and felt them. Like, I remember running down the corridor and hearing the emergency alert sirens, and it has very distinct type sound to it. And yeah, I do remember that panic. It'd be like, we're under attack, and this explosion went off. I didn't see it, but I heard it and felt the concussive force. It knocked like me and a group of other people off our feet. And there's one Japanese officer. She picks me up, grabs me by my forearm like this. We start running towards this bulkhead, and there are these vertical tubes on the end of it. And they had like indicator lights, like red for occupied, green for available. And she's like, there's one available up there. And I remember putting her hand on it. The tube opened up. She jumped in and got sucked upward. And I ran in and I got pulled downward. And next thing I know, it's almost like a back of a chair like this, but with a bicycle seat. And in the armrests, there are like two kind of comm sticks, right? And these straps went over my forearms and injected a bunch of needles in, pumping full drugs. And I remember like a heads up system coming down. And I remember basically what it was is you can move these two weapons independently, and then use the entire body to basically pivot the entire turret. And there's a foot pedal that fired an antimatter cannon on top of that. And so they're like these basically, like the bad guys would show up as little red squares on the heads up, and a friendly would show up as a little green square. And if I pulled the trigger when a little green square went in front of it, the trigger would lock. So it's not to to avoid friendly fire. And I remember it was like basically 5 or 6 hours. I do remember they tried to pull a move where like a row of them head straight towards you, and then they're basically trying to take out the defense turrets by making a T-run, basically split and then go down the side of the ship. And I remember like seeing that before it happened and told people like, shift the weapons 90 degrees aft, and everyone's like boom, 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 pow, 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 pow. But yeah, I do remember the crash after that sucked. So it's interesting is the admiral who's command of that command carrier was my middle school principal. And this is where I say, like, I think they invert parts of our personality, because as an admiral, the man was incredibly accomplished. As a middle school principal, the man was incredibly incompetent. And incompetence is not something you normally associate with a Japanese guy. Let's put it that way. I do know the Zoro Koishu, they build mechs, and diplomatically they're best suited for dealing with Draco, because the Draco honor code and the Samurai honor code complement each other. And once they have these mechs, they're like equal to the Draco. And so they basically beat the Draco by playing by their own rules. You see, I do know that they have some pretty advanced fighter technology. They have basically one, they call it the Needle, and it, just imagining like a flying crotch rocket. Those things are like really small, but they're really fast. Well, I mean, the command carrier is interstellar, so, definitely. I think it has all three FTL components. I think, I explained this, like, think of it like a gear shift, okay? So first gear is subluminal speeds. It's pretty self-explanatory. First gear is warp drive. Second gear is warp drive. And that's how you get from your local galactic neighborhood. And, if you want to get from, say, here to Alpha Centauri or, Tau Ceti or something, average cruising speed is 60 light years per hour. So, and then third gear is, some people call it transdimensional, and call it hyperspace. And that's how you get from one quadrant to another. And then you fold space if you want to get from one galaxy to another. So, one thing where science fiction gets it wrong is they only shows one method of FTL. When we use like 3 different types. And especially when you screw it up, like, say, folding space, you find a type O super blue giant, and one end of the galaxy, you find its counterpart on the other galaxy. Something about linking the gravity wells together. I don't exactly understand why, but like you'll see this in movies where they like fold space and right in the middle of a star system. You don't do that because you don't want to materialize in the middle of some space junk. So yeah, like I'd say all of our dark fleets have those capabilities. I mean, it depends on the size of the ship, but most of them have that. None of the ships are made on Earth itself, like the TRBs and stuff like that are. But usually, if you're going to build like a large starship, you can hide it behind the dark side of the moon. maybe way out in the asteroid belt, or like outside the solar system altogether. But you do see it occasionally, like when some amateur UFO hunter, you'll see this online, like, giant UFO spotted near Saturn. If it looks like it came out of Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica, it's one of ours. And I saw one, again, they thought it was a UFO, looked like a flying RV. If it looks like a flying RV, it's definitely one of ours. I do remember on the Franklin pulling a little prank where instead of this is Tanya, my elder Tanya, she served on that. And instead of busting the crewmen for doing this, she decided to join in. And basically what you do is you take a piece of gravity plating and you pod mod the gravitic threshold, the vertical threshold, and modify the potentiometers. Pod mod means. So, because normally, like a foot level, it's like 1.15 G, and if you raise your hand like this, it's like 0.85 G. But you change the vertical thresholds for all of a sudden, like, the floor is like 5 times gravity, and it's like 0.5 at, you raise your hand like this. And do is you take a cigarette, light it, take a couple puffs, put it right into the gravitational field, and give it a gentle flick. And what's going to happen is it's going to start flying, leaving a trail of smoke rings, just enough downward momentum. Right when it gets past the last 2-3 feet of gravity plane, also it'll nosedive and flatten. It'll literally pancake against the deck plating, and you'll have something about the size of like a cigarette bus, but squished down into like the dimensions of a quarter. And the smoke would literally turn to liquid and splatters when it hits it. So that was like a type of prank that some of the crewmen used to pull. I don't know where the Franklin was built. I know it has a crew capacity of about 1,000. Roughly the same dimensions as the Enterprise D from Star Trek Next Generation. It's kind of a wedge shape. Kind of like a lot of them will have that kind of like fork shape in front of it, which is usually either a primary weapon or a launch bay of some kind. And it's kind of like the launch bay is similar to, if you remember like Battlestar Galactica, they use mass drivers to launch their fighters. So we do employ something like that to launch craft out of, it's a Corvette class, and this was actually like for like stealth missions, like clandestine. That even by Darkfleet standards, we're the tip of the spear, and like so I don't remember too much of the details, but I do remember like when Tanya's first test at command, she successfully navigated the Franklin out of a plasma storm. So she, that I did confirm that. But yeah, she was on an undercover assignment among the Lyrans because they developed an antidote for the black goo, but they didn't want to share it with anyone. And she went undercover as a Lyran handmaiden during a coronation, and she acquired the sample successfully. She was about to sneak out, but then a third party decided to pull off a coup, and there was a Mexican standoff. The Praetorian Guard stormed in, and the shit hit the fan, and she got captured. And like I said, she suffered a near-death experience from that. She was like rescued at the last minute, like extracted from that. But she was severely damaged, to say the least. But that trauma, that near-death experience, caused like this quantum entanglement between us, and her, causing like her personality to come through me. And like I said, that really, really screwed up my life for a period of time. Adding like gender dysphoria on top of this, and because I have one alter that's a cyborg and another one that's a congenital amputee, add like bodily integrity disorder on top of that. So massive amount of confusion. But the thing is, like, now I know why it happened and these things don't affect me the way they used to. It's like having closure. The antidote for the black goo is like this green chartreuse gas. And I think on a molecular level, I'm not exactly sure, but I believe how it works is at like a submolecular level, it generates like a crystalline lattice that surrounds the black goo molecules. I mean, at least that's what I was remote viewing at the submicron level. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not 100%, but I think that's how I saw it work. Franklin is JDFC. The JDFC, the Joint Defense Force Command, that's the United States Dark Fleet. Solar Warden is the Coast Guard. Their vehicles and their tactics, all that is aimed towards defending the solar system, as opposed to like going out into like deep interstellar space. Usually you don't have vehicles that are too big with Solar Warden, because they usually have like bases and stuff, like especially in the asteroid belt, or on Mars. Or like some of the Jovian moons, for example, they might have a base there. Randy Kramer described kind of a teardrop-shaped vehicle. So, and I think he did have like a command ship that they docked with. Okay, as far as the number of colonies out there, and I've heard different numbers, I think it's like Solarans own like maybe 150 total. I think the United States has like 45 star systems. I know the Israelis have their basically Tau Ceti 2 is New Israel, effectively. And I know not all the countries have dark fleets, have their fleets, but it seems, I highly suspect that the UN is running this. Because, like I said, all the G20 countries are involved, and the G8 ones that have the dark fleets. So it's for me, it feels like the UN is behind it. The black budget, a lot of it comes from illicit drug sales. And I'm pretty sure a good chunk of that comes from human trafficking too, because that's heavily involved. There's ways they do some creative accounting to hide a lot of this. But yeah, it's like probably trillions of dollars, if not more. You really got to think and if they wanted to end the drug use, they could. If they really wanted to eliminate, say, heroin, they have the methods to do it. They don't want to. I know, like, amongst the breakaway civilian population, they have like a credit-based system. And there's a reason why they do that. It's because, like, you just give everything away from people. It doesn't have any real value. If you earn it, then it does have real value, and plus it keeps people motivated. So instead of like a monetary system like we do, there's like a credit-based system, and normally that involves a palm print. Although I think Autumn, they make, she has access to like a retinal scanner or voice print ID, since the palm print obviously is not an option for her. There was like, I remember viewed her one time. She was clubbing, her and her friends decided to go clubbing, and the idiots at the club had the hardest time finding a retinal scanner. And then, she approached the clerks like, palm print? She waves her, excuse me, how's that possible? Can you get me, I need a retinal scanner. And there's like, first like, voice print scanner, it's like blasting music really loud. I was like, are you stupid? it's like holding up the line and shit. And finally they managed to get a retinal scanner for her. But that rarely happens. Universal basic income, to the point, it's like, we're giving you enough money and see if you can turn around and make something with it. Like in Autumn's case, she she's kind of a fashionista. She has like her whole line of like these custom-made bras she likes to sell. And they have some like one of them, there's like an LCD light mixed into the threads, and so the lining has like this little pattern that follows the stitch pattern, and you'll see it like she also used like this isomorphic material that looks like it was what's the word I'm looking for, not wrinkly, but it three-dimensionally, it looked like it was like kind of like the material, like it's actually the surface of the fabric is actually flat, but it was almost a holographic look to make it look frumpled, or to give it that kind of a velvety appearance. So they also have like, she has a tattoo on her back that has like, probably using some sort of nanites that would like light up and follow the pattern on the tattoo. So I have seen that. And Autumn also paints, and she's kind of like a local tourist attraction when she lives in Karelia, because she'd paint with her feet, kind of draw a small crowd. So that was her thing. But that's the reason why I made an arrangement with her, because her life paralleled mine the most. So if something should happen to me, I can rehome to her. It's like an insurance policy. And the reason why, like I said, her life parallels mine the most. So it'd still be a gigantic adjustment, but it won't. If I end up with somebody who's like in a military position, and all of a sudden, what the fuck do I do? It's like, I remember it was like when altars bled through me, but how would the inverse go? Ooh, Raven. Oh God, that is complicated. Yeah, Raven, my cyborg altar. I think like Raven was the experiment and Tanya might have been the control. But Raven knew about Tanya and kind of became a mysterious benefactor. But she was designed to basically be the ultimate living weapon, specifically as like an espionage unit, like infiltration, sabotage, assassinations, shit like that. And she was sent to take out the leadership of the Orion priesthood. And she actually managed to get a few of them. But then she encountered this one woman. And when Raven tried to attack her, this woman's like daughter, who's like maybe the equivalent of like 7 or 8 year old girl, like protected her mother with her own body. And Raven could not bring herself to kill the girl. And so that resulted in mission failure, and her handlers started deactivating her. And, her systems were, shutting down one by one. And Raven just turned around to this priestess and started begging for help. And she managed to wave the hand to block the signal. And granted Raven asylum. The first time she ever felt any true love or compassion coming from somebody, she went native, converted to the Mintakan faith, and became a cleric. And she became something of a celebrity on Mintakan Prime. But yeah, she intervened, and she was aware of me probably for a while, and she intervened during the quantum entanglement. And I realized in hindsight that, okay, wait a minute, Tanya and Raven had totally different personalities. These are different alters. And so I remote viewed Raven, and that's when I saw her on Mintakan Prime, So I definitely remote viewed her a lot. I remember one time seeing her deliver a sermon where, okay, so Raven, all 4 of her limbs are artificial, they're cybernetic. And she thinks of her arms and legs like we think of articles of clothing. And she's got these like 5.5 inch long non-retractable claws at the end of her hands. And she used them as like wands, basically. Where I saw her like draw the power in from basically that planet's equivalent of Gaia. And we drew the power in and redirecting it towards this crowd. And I saw this wave of psionic energy. And this crowd, I could totally feel, was like this massive positive benefit, because they're like, oh, they totally felt that. I remember another time, this incident where one of the local wildlife, like giant creature about the size of an Asian elephant, but its head was shaped more like a camel. It's kind of like flatter face. And well, apparently this creature had died for whatever reason, but it was pregnant and its offspring inside was still alive. And so I remember Raven walked up to this creature's belly, waved her hand. It's kind of large, black, kind of pustule formed. And she took her pinky claw, cut the thing open, this massive gusher. And I saw 2 Mintakans go in there, reach in, and they pulled this baby creature out. And then again, with their claw, she cut the umbilical cord. And the baby creature was alive and well. And so, yeah, Raven, partook in that. I think it required her unique touch. So I saw her do that. And I remember another time, I guess she had business to take care of, like in the city. And so she's using this vehicle that, I don't know if you remember Stargate Atlantis, the puddle jumpers. Kind of look like that, but kind of a stubbier version. And there's these, like on this one building, there's kind of like these circular looking windows. Well, this vehicle plugged right into it. The front of it like dematerialized and it became part of the building. And she just walked out with some of the other people who are on that. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. Okay, I know the first 2 tenets of the Mintakan faith is, the first one is never knowingly harm an innocent, never knowingly allow an innocent to come to harm. But should you fail, balance must be maintained. The second one is basically your voice contains a lot of power, thus use it sparingly. Which is why if you encounter any like devout Mintakans, they never speak above a whisper. Which is why I had a hard time with the clairaudience with Raven. I needed some like third party help with her. But after I made the initial contact with Raven, from 1,200 light years away, she yanked the cord out of my computer out of the wall. At first, I thought it died. I was like, oh, crap. And I went to lay on my bed, and next thing you know, Raven was like on top of me. And it was like, it felt more real than anything I've experienced in the flesh in the here and now. Like, she was almost tangible, almost visible. I could feel the heat and pressure from her body. Couldn't quite feel her, but I could feel that. And so for a while, yeah, me and Raven were lovers, were significant others. And a few times we even had arguments like a married couple. It's hilarious. But like, I remember one time I invited her to come on a store run with me, and I noticed her standing right next to me. The only thing she was wearing were cybernetics, and she looked at me and she's like, "Yes, Raven, I know I'm the only one who can see you." So yeah, I went to the store and she decided to check out the employees only area. It was like one of those things where I was about to leave. I'm like, Raven. People all starting to stare at me. Raven, come on. And I started come out and got back to my place. I was about to open the front gate to my building, and she decided just to scale the wall like it was nothing and met me inside to meet me inside. So yeah, that was interesting, having a relationship with your alter. It was purely telepathic. It felt more real, like I said, than anything I experienced thus far in person. Actually, and unfortunately I don't think any of them know, but starting with Tanya's quantum entanglement in the Castro area in San Francisco, every Wednesday night there's this church it was catering to the homeless youth. But we kept going back even though we aged out. And I realized this in hindsight is that was the rest of the officer class from the Franklin. Like 30 or 40 of us would all end up being in this one. And apparently, even though it might have been subconscious, people might have recognized I was the highest ranking officer there because I ended up being a default leader. So, yeah, I think there must, because I remember especially when the quantum entanglement first hit me, I was 21. I just had to relocate to San Francisco, and I realized in hindsight there must have been some sort of built-in regrouping, or a rehoming area, like a restaging area or something like that. And it also makes perfect sense since I'm a Presidio kid, and it makes sense that San Francisco Bay Area would be where all that happened, especially with the crew of the Franklin. So yeah, I talk about the Presidios, basically like the West Coast answer to Montauk, and I don't have any. I only know I was part of it. A few people remember seeing me there in the Presidio. Now I don't remember too much. I do remember having some nasty experiences as a young child with. I'm not going to say Brian Dennehy necessarily, but maybe I think it's his clone who we knew as the actor named Brian Dennehy. But this guy, let's put it this way, he was involved in some rather sick shit involving young children and bestiality. And that's all the detail we need to know for the moment. Well, the way I look at it is I'm owed a life for all this. This one has been totally fucked up since the beginning, not even bearing a resemblance of a normal life. No matter how hard I try, so I am owed for this big time. When the disclosure comes out, hopefully eventually, whichever one comes first, but that or reach the end of my mortal coil before then. But either way I look at it, I'm owed a life.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something really exciting, the LifeWave X39 patch. To help us understand how this works, we have LifeWave brand partner Arthur Gross here. Thanks for joining us, Arthur.
Thanks for having me, James. I'm excited to talk about this revolutionary technology.
So, I've been hearing a lot about this X39 patch. Can you explain a little bit more on how it works?
Absolutely. The X39 patch is groundbreaking because it uses phototherapy, specifically photobiomodulation, to activate your body's natural GHK copper peptide levels. This, in turn, reactivates your stem cells, which helps reset over 4,000 genes to how they worked when you were younger. Think back to your 20s.
Wow, all that just from wearing an X39 patch.
Exactly. The patch uses a patented, non-invasive nanocrystal technology that reflects specific wavelengths of light from your body's infrared light. When it touches your skin, it stimulates biochemical changes that trigger the production of peptides and amino acids. This increases mitochondrial energy, boosts healthy stem cell activity, and helps with overall cellular repair.
Wow, that sounds incredible. But a lot of people might be wondering how safe they are.
The X39 patch is completely safe. It's been clinically proven and is recognized by the FDA as a general wellness product. Plus, it's non-transdermal and non-invasive, meaning nothing actually enters your body, and there are no chemicals involved.
Wow, so we have no topical creams, injections, or anything like that.
Exactly. It's as easy as wearing a small patch, and it's also waterproof and showerproof, so you can wear it throughout the day without worry.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, I've read a lot about various expensive stem cell therapies. How would the X39 compare to some of these other type of options?
Traditional stem cell therapies can cost thousands of dollars, but the X39 patch offers a much more affordable solution. It's designed to work naturally with your body and is available at a fraction of the cost while still being 96% effective on activating your body's stem cells.
I can see why so many people are excited about this. So, if someone is interested in trying the X39 patch, what can they expect from wearing the patch?
Most people notice an increase in energy, faster recovery from physical activities, and even improvements in overall health and wellness. It really helps to revitalize your body by supporting stem cell production and resetting your genes.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Where can people learn more and try the X39 patch?
If they click the link below the description, it'll take you to James Rink's LifeWave website, which helps you get started. It's such an easy and effective way to tap into your body's natural healing abilities. If you have any questions, please send us an email at liveyounger.jmr@gmail.com.
Wow, thank you, Arthur, for shedding light on this amazing technology. The X39 patch sounds like a must try for anyone looking to feel more youthful and energized.
My pleasure, James. It's definitely worth exploring.
Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.